Hi, my name is Amanda Wright. You can find me at Creative Genius Solutions on Facebook. I wrote this particular poem, A Corner of the World, about intersections, and more specifically about intersections in Roanoke that we don't always necessarily see unless we're a little bit more aware of our surroundings. A corner of the world. Starbucks addicts trumpet cold air when they enter the shop as med students add sweet bee shit to their bean juice. A violent hiccup echoes in the chamber. ID hipster badges swing in the direction of the cacophonic symphony. Take your tablespoon of sugar in the raw to calm spasms. Roanoke's finest blends of cotton and coffee dot the basket weave subway tile with scarlet and cream hues of winter coats. Mr. Java Chip Frappuccino delivers the concoction to his wife, who is soothing her moaning stuffed pink marshmallow. A warning to the city hospital beyond the caffeinated wall: be prepared, more people pass in cold weather rather than in heat. White trash poverty broadside just beyond the railroad tracks. Needle-fed addicts beyond the brush and barren yards. Charity care in line of sight without access. Yeah, the Starbucks next to the hospital.
Yes, yes.
Like,
that was such a good.
It was like, there's such a difference between the two.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't do gratitude very well, so this one's called 30 Days of Gratitude, so I put it all in one shot.
Okay.
30 days is not enough to give thanks to everything and everyone who completes my life, some are good, some bad, but most of them neutral. Much like my mom's Venn diagram of saints and sinners is presented in her Ruth Naomi class this morning, I am the gray area where the two circles overlap. When contemplating my weakness in each saint and each sinner, I realized maybe I'm not doing so bad. Maybe the struggle I have plowed through, planted the seeds, tilled the soil, watered the garden, and pulled the weeds to create a more refined version of the me I see today. Thank you to my troubles and problems. Thank you to the downed power lines, the uprooted trees, and the eroded earth, for your dutiful inspection of my heart and the air I choose to breathe, that culminated to the strength of me through you. And I will be reading a story stem I wrote a few years ago called The Cavern. Ariella searched among the crests of ocean waves until she spotted the skiff that her cousin was on. The ocean was relatively calm this morning. Another half hour would pass by before the boat will be close enough to dock to the port. She walked along the shoreline of the tiny island that her family lived on. Her father was a lightkeeper, and her mother would ferry guests to the island for tours. Ariella stopped to pick up an oyster shell that washed up on the shore. The underside, where the guts of the oyster had been, was smooth and polished. She ran her finger along the outer shell that had been exposed to the ocean. The surface of the shell was rough and bumpy, but not without a pattern. She knew a layer of the shell formed every year, not unlike that of tree rings. Each layer had its own features. There were shades of gray, beige, and white. The bumps that ran along the arch of the shell were striated and rose in elevation the closer she traced her finger towards where the hinge of the oyster would have been. She considered the roughness of the shell and her cousin, Delphinia. Delphinia's world was far different from Ariella's. She lived in the city and she was very proper. Ariella liked to climb rocks, explore the caverns underneath the cliffs, and sail. She was a tomboy by nature, but she was surrounded by the shifting nature of the ocean. Delphinia didn't like any of these things anymore. When they were 9, Delphinia would help Ariella explore the caverns under the cliffs. They created a little play area underneath their favorite one until Delphinia lost her favorite doll. They were playing in one of these caverns as a storm came in quickly. The tide washed into the cavern faster than they had anticipated. The girls barely escaped before the ocean swallowed the cavern and all the decorating they had been working on. As they climbed out of the mouth of the cave, they were bombarded by waves, and Delphinia lost her grip on her doll that she rescued. The waves swallowed the doll. Delphinia never forgave Ariella for that loss. Ariella hiked toward the dock to wait for the incoming skiff. She knew her mother would be upset if she were not there to greet her cousin and to help her tie off the boat. She reached for the rope her mother tossed to her and tied it off to the dock cleat. She grabbed her mother's hand and tugged until the boat was close to the dock. Mom handed Delphinia's luggage to her. She could see her cousin silently judging her with her eyes. It was going to be a long week with her if she continued to carry on like this, Ariella thought. Delphinia gingerly stepped up on the dock as if she were trying to avoid touching the surface. They each picked up a piece of luggage or gear, loaded the yellow truck, and drove down the path to the house. Ariella stared out the window of the truck while her mom and cousin chit-chatted. Her cousin's voice had changed since the last time she had visited. It wasn't irritatingly tinny like the squeak of a mouse. She carried a slightly deeper but more lyrical tone. She talked about boys with my mom. Ariella knew nothing about boys except for the ones that she would meet on tours. All she knew is that they asked a lot of questions about her life on the island. It was at that moment the pickup truck ended its journey across the island. The house was made from the same stone as the lighthouse, slate gray. Everything looked gray on the island, especially in the winter. But it was summer, and the island was dotted with tufts of tall beach grass. The family built a garden several years ago and found that they could freeze or they could produce in order to have plenty of food during the harsh winter months. It was those times that the island felt the most isolated from the outside world. Dinner was simple and quiet. Ariella's father had already left to man the lighthouse for the night. I have to go back to the mainland in the morning. Your father will want to sleep. Why don't you girls spend some time together and show her around the island? I'm sure it has changed a bit since you were last here, Delphinia. That would be enjoyable, she responded sarcastically. The next morning when the girls rose from slumber, they noticed that Mother had already left. There were 2 plates set on the table. The 2 butter biscuits and cups of tea were still steaming in the morning light. The girls tore through their biscuits and tried not to look at each other from across the table. That was until they could hear the thunderous snores of Ariella's father that felt like it would shake the house off its foundation. They looked at each other and giggled for the first time in 3 years. They changed into old jeans and shirts and met each other at the door outside the house so Ariella's father could rest. What should we do now? Delphine asked her cousin. I think we should go back to check out the caverns. Delphinia froze. But you remembered what happened there last time we were there? I mean, that's why we're not friends anymore. A lot has changed since then. You don't seem to like doll playing that much anymore either. Delphinia shrugged. Ariella grabbed her knapsack full of supplies, water and extra biscuits her mom left behind. They hiked eastward toward the cliffs. Ariella found the path that she used to walk along the cliff surface, and the girls slowly descended, watching to make sure that their footing did not slip on the cliff edge. They found the opening of a cavern, the same cavern they visited 3 years ago. Ariella took 2 candles, lit them, and handed one to Delphinia. I don't remember it being this small, Delphinia recalled. Neither do I. They walked towards the rear of the cave when Ariella spotted an unusual object on the cavern floor. She walked to the object tentatively for fear that it might be a rat. Delphinia paused from looking at the cavern wall to her cousin. She followed her, mouth agape, when she recognized what was on the ground. My doll, Delphinia exclaimed. Ariella shook her head in response, picked up the doll and handed it to her cousin. Why is it not dirty or torn to shreds? She asked as she turns to Ariella after a thorough inspection. I don't know, Ariella responds just as bewildered as her cousin. A strong wind blows through the cavern as the girls raise their arms to shield their eyes. Sand rises around them in a helical formation, cutting off the view of the cavern's opening. It is difficult to tell how long the sandstorm lasted, but the girls were beginning to cough and felt the air being choked from them. When the dust settled, the cavern looked no different than when they had first entered it. Maybe we should leave, suggested Delphinia. Ariella nodded in agreement, and they walked back to the opening. Ariella reached for Delphinia's doll and put it in her knapsack. I don't want the same mistake to happen again. Delphinia hands Ariella her doll, and they carefully ascend the ledge until they reach the top. Taking a deep breath, they survey their surroundings and realize that they are no longer on the island.